Everybody, hello Helen. It's a pleasure to introduce Helen, who's a British Canadian English language teacher, and they've been teaching English for 10 years to students age 3 up to adults in levels A1 to C2. And they've taught in 5 different countries, including 5 in Spain and Netherlands. So, all yours, Helen. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. That's a wonderful introduction.
Welcome.
Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to my talk, Beating the Binary, Experiences, Challenges, and Next Steps. My pronouns are they, them. They're my preference. If you use she, her, it's not going to break my heart, but I do prefer if you could use them, and I'll actually put them in my title now to help remind you. There we go. So now you can see them. In this talk, I am going to talk about my personal gender identity and my gender expression. I'm going to talk about my personal sexual and romantic or emotional attraction. I'm going to talk about my professional experiences and some serious challenges that I've faced while working in Spain for the last 5 years. And I'm also going to make some suggestions for teachers, okay, to help with discussing gender, sexuality, and attraction in the classroom and in the staff room. Because while discussing queer issues in the classroom has a certain set of challenges, discussing it in the staff room has another set of challenges, as we all know. And then hopefully I'll finish up with a Q&A to give you all a bit of a chance to ask me some questions if you have any particular ones. Oh, there are lots of messages. Can you all see my slideshow okay? Let me scroll down and check them.
Yes, everything's fine.
Yes. Okay, good. Awesome. So you may have noticed that I have had some exciting different backgrounds. All of my backgrounds are from a website called Unsplash, which is a website where photographers can share their photos for attributed use. And all I did was go and type in the word queer or pride, and I found a plethora of images to use as my backgrounds. If you check the upper right-hand corner of every page, you can see the attribution for each photographer. As other speakers have talked about, it's really great to keep an eye out for diverse images that we could use in our teaching. And lots of other websites have been named, but nobody had named Unsplash yet. So I'm pleased that I'm able to bring it up. So before we get started, I'm going to do a little bit of Lexis. Yay. We all know all about that. I want to check some vocabulary to make sure that I'm not throwing strange words at you that you don't know. So first off, gender identity. So I like to call this my personhood, and I sort of gesture towards my head because this is who I am, okay? It's how a person feels about their gender identity. So you are female or male or neither of those. You could be agender or gender queer or non-binary. There are a plethora of terms. I could get into things like demi-girl and demi-boy, but we won't do that now. I would highly suggest if you're confused about gender identities to have a bit of a search. There are a lot of them out there, and throughout history, many cultures have had many, many genders, not just male and female. So, okay. Great. Gender expression and presentation. So this is what I look like, how I present myself. So it's the physical representation of my gender. So that's in my body shape, my voice, my clothing and hairstyle, all of those sorts of things. Yeah. So you could say, we sometimes talk about people dressing masculinely or dressing femininely or dressing androgynous, and that's what that is. That's your expression or presentation of your gender, which is of course different from your actual feelings and your gender as it is. Okay? Great. So next, assigned at birth. Some of you may have seen this around the internet. You might have seen AFAB or AMAB in someone's, social media profile. AMAB means assigned male at birth, and AFAB means assigned female at birth. So this is the classification of babies right after they're born by the doctors and nurses who are caring for them. And this is taking into consideration their hormones, their chromosomes, and their anatomy. We always see that like joke, but it's a little more complicated than that nowadays. And then the doctor and nurses will classify the baby as intersex or female or male or another sex based on those factors that they've observed. Okay, so this is the classification given to you upon birth based on those factors, often just your parts, but it depends on the country and the laws and those sorts of things. Okay, sexuality. So this is who you are physically attracted to. This is called your sexual orientation. So that's when you go, when you see someone, right? Like, I am really attracted to that person. Okay, just from looking at their appearance and the way that they present themselves. That's physical attraction. And it is different from emotional attraction. So this is, of course, when you have spent a lot of time with someone and you feel romantically about them, you're attracted to them emotionally based on their personality characteristics and not only their physical attributes and the way that they present themselves. Okay, so yeah. Great. And finally, the last word, queer. Now, I had to adapt my definition of this. All of these definitions came from a really great website, the Trans Student Resource. But this final one I adapted from the Lexico UK Dictionary. And I had to adapt it because I felt it wasn't quite broad enough. But queer means any gender identity or expression or presentation, or any sexual or romantic or emotional orientation which does not correspond to the norms of cisgender and heterosexual. Okay, so queer is a bit of an umbrella term for the LGBTQ community. Yeah, I felt that the definition in Lexico is a bit more narrow. If you're really interested, you can go check it out and see what the difference is. Something in the chat. Yeah, well, I tried. On the subject of the word queer, I feel it's important to mention that queer is a term which is and has been a slur against queer people, much like the word gay. It's been used sort of negatively and detrimentally against people who are not cisgender and or heterosexual. And so a lot of people within the queer community have a lot of mixed feelings about it. Some people are really fine with it. They're very much in favor of, taking the thing meant to hurt you and owning it. Like, I'm a queer person, you can't use this word to hurt me anymore. Great. There are some people, some older people, but not always older people, let's not stereotype, who this word still is a slur to them. It's still hurtful, it's painful, it's been used to bully them or to hurt them in some way in the past or over a long period of time. So they do not use that word to describe themselves because it's an insult. So even people within the queer community are a little bit sometimes careful about using it. I do recommend checking in with queer people when you're talking to them, just to see like how they like to describe themselves and how they like to be addressed. I wouldn't use queer to describe someone unless I knew they liked it to be called queer. Yeah, you never know what someone's experience with a word has been. But in my experience, I think everyone that I know personally and have a close relationship with likes the word queer and uses it freely. Because people love the word queer because it's being used so negatively and we're taking control of it and using it to describe ourselves. But also, I mean, even before the word queer was used to describe LGBTQ people, it was basically used to just describe people who are outside of society's obligations, of society's norms, of society's mandates. And so a lot of queer people feel a lot of pride and like, I am me. I am not what society has told me to be. So there is a big sense of that. So energy in using this word. So while I caution you with using it, it is generally, in my experience, a positive word. Okay, great. Questions in the chat. Yeah, I think it's a pretty word too, Tyson. I like it. But I also have never had it used against me as a slur. Nobody's ever said, ugh, you're queer. You know, that I've never had that experience. So, I mean, I can empathize with someone who's had it used against them in a really pejorative way, why they would not want to use it to describe themselves. So, yeah. All right. So my first point, the personal is political. This is not a new idea. In fact, it goes way back to feminist teachings of the 70s, 60s, 70s, second wave feminism. Carol Hanisch uses it in her paper of the same title. However, I can't really give credit to the person who created this statement because there isn't one. Nobody's really stood up to say, yes, I coined the personal is political. Carol Hanisch keeps referred to the editors of the magazine where she published it. And all of them sort of refused to take credit as well. They were all like, no, no one would take credit for it. So it was sort of decided that it was a phrase which had been put out there by the collective experiences of women who were experiencing sexism and patriarchal oppression. So it was a bit of a collective.
Helen, may I interrupt just for a quick second?
Yep.
There's some sort of electrical sounding feedback in your audio.
Hold on.
Getting progressively worse.
Is it better now? I just turned it off and turned it back on.
No, it started again.
Well, I can change to different headphones if everybody doesn't mind being patient.
No
But
problem.
is it better now? I sometimes find it comes for a short time and then it goes away. Is it all right?
Not great.
No? Normal? No? Okay. Then what I'll do is I will change to other headphones. This is why you always have backup headphones. I hope that the quality of audio will be better, though, with my other ones. So one
Cool.
second, everyone. All right. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
That's great. Yep.
All right, super. Hopefully you can still hear me as clearly as you could with the headset. All right, great. Thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so yeah, this is a phrase which doesn't really have an origin. Nobody's ever taken credit for it. So I'm going to take this phrase and expand it a bit and use it in my presentation today. In my presentation, I'm going to talk about the personal. I'm going to talk about the political or some social justice themes, and also obviously the professional and the unprofessional and when unprofessional situations happen. And I'm just going to give a bit of a warning right now. I might, refer to sexual organs and say like penis or vagina or stuff like that in this talk. So I just want to give everybody a bit of a heads up now so that they know that that's coming. I might talk sort of explicitly about some sexual terms. So I just want to let everyone know now so they're not shocked when it happens. Okay, great. So the next thing I want to raise, something very well, it is what they're called, Tyson, you're right. But some people come to a teaching webinar and they're not expecting to hear me talk about vaginas and penises. So something that was quite influential on me when I was at university is Gender Trouble by Judy Butler, published in 1990, which is the year of my birth. Coincidence? I think not. So in Gender Trouble, anybody who's familiar at all with queer theory or with feminist theory in the 90s will be at least vaguely aware of some of the ideas. She talks about both sex, remember our parts, right? And gender, our personhood, as being constructed. Behaviors that we've learned and emulated over time, things that come from internal but also external influences. And she also talks about this idea of role and the roles that we play. And so some of those roles are conscious. We know that we're doing them at the moment, and other times they're unconscious and we just do, and then realize later, oh, that was a bit, or, oh, I'm not sure that's something I would naturally do, or that's definitely learned behavior. I don't really feel like that's acceptable. Yeah, or that's not me, that sort of thing. So for example, you don't play the exact same role or act the same way around your father as you do around your partner, as you do around your the students in your class if you're a teacher, or around the administrator or manager of the teaching center where you work, or your boss. When we are around parents versus partners alone. There are things that you talk about and do with your partner that you just don't talk about and do with your parent or parents or guardians, you know? In the same way that, you know, there are things that you talk about and do with learners that you do not talk about and do with the administrators, etc. And some of that is conscious. We know that we're doing it, and we've made conscious decisions to behave a certain way or say certain things. But at other times it's unconscious. We just do it instinctively, kind of without thinking. Yeah, and so throughout this talk, I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the things that I do consciously and unconsciously, and how that might relate to myself. Okay, you all still with me? I threw kind of a bit of queer theory at you, but anyway, so since we're going to talk about be personal and talk a lot about me and my personal experiences, you better meet me. Here I am, Mx Helen. My gender identity is non-binary, which is often shortened nowadays to NB, E-N-B-Y. And we don't say NB, as in the letters NB anymore, because that is used for the, in connection with race theory nowadays. With people of color, POC, often use the word NB for not Black. So a person of color who's not Black, an NBPOC, for example, someone who's Asian, is talking about issues of race and saying, well, I'm talking about issues of race, but I'm NBPOC, so I'm talking about issues relating to my my sense as an Asian person. Okay, so it gets very confusing if queer people are using NB to talk about non-binary people, and then people of color are using NB to say not Black. So the queer community went, right, you were here first, that's fine, we'll use this instead. I quite like NB. I think it's sweet, it's easy, and we pronounce it the same, NB, NB. But some queer people don't, some non-binary people don't like it. They think it's like cutesy, or, you know, they think it's weird and they prefer to just call themselves non-binary. I'm fine with either, it doesn't really matter. NB is just easier and shorter. Next up is my gender expression. So I would describe my gender expression as androgynous. I would never describe myself as particularly masculine or particularly feminine at all. My cousin's son once responded to his brother when his brother said, "Are you a boy or a girl?" And his brother looked at him and said, "Helen's Helen." It was the most beautiful representation of my gender. Kids know, we think that kids can't handle queer ideas, and they can. They're fine. Don't stop worrying about the kids. They're okay. And he just absolutely accepted this, and then carried on talking about something else. I think dinosaurs. So yeah. So I would describe myself as an androgynous person, neither masculine nor feminine. Next up. Assigned female at birth. The doctor looked at me and went, "That's a girl." Okay, thanks for announcing my sex to the entire ward, doctor, but that is not my gender, thanks. And my sexuality is what is called demisexual. A lot of you will probably never have seen or heard this term, and that's okay. I didn't know what it was for the majority of my life. So demisexual people, or people who experience demisexuality, are people who are attracted to other people romantic, sexually. This is your sexual orientation, right? So what's physically attractive to you. And that is based on emotions. Okay, that's what the demi prefix means. So what that means is that people I'm not emotionally or romantically attached to do not turn me on at all, like 0% interest. Like, you're nice to look at, but I don't want to have sex with you. That is what demisexuality is. Like, I can appreciate the aesthetics of people, but I don't really want to engage with them sexually. Some people sort of place demisexual next to asexual, because, you know, you're not interested in sex unless it's connected to feelings. It's not the same thing, but it might be similar in some ways for some ace people. So yeah, that's me. My attraction is Adam. That's him. He's my partner. That's us several months ago. And there was always a lot of jokes of Helen's Adamsexual. But no, I am what is called demi-romantic as well. So I form romantic attachments based on time and compatibility and, you know, personality traits of other people. I've said to partners before, you know, I'd date you if you were an Amanda. Hilariously, I have actually dated an Amanda. But anyway, so, you know, I said to Adam, I'd date you if you were an Amanda. Or I said to an ex-partner of mine, Dave, well, I'd date you if you were a Danielle, right? Because their sex and gender doesn't really factor in for me at all. For me, it's all about the emotional attachment that I have to that person. Yeah, so that's what demi means. Yeah. Yeah, so to give a bit of a visual of me, I turn to the very wonderful Gender Unicorn. I don't know if any of you have seen this before. It's great. This is from the Trans Student Org. They're really great. I've got the educational resources down there on the bottom on the left. So this is my trans unicorn. So you can see that my preferred pronouns are they, them, but I'll also accept she, her. My gender identity, non-binary, expression androgynous. I'm AFAB. I'm physically attracted to, you know, everyone. As long as I have an emotional attachment to you, then, you know, we're good. And I'm, you know, I form romantic connections based on the longevity of the relationships and connections. So yeah, this is a lovely queer resource. I've put mine there, but then I've also put a screenshot. You can do it interactively online. There's a coloring book and it's in a variety of languages, which I think is really great. Yeah, so professional experiences and challenges. Now that we've got all the defining and phrasing out of the way, let's talk about my experiences. So I'm talking about Spain. Thank you, Wikipedia, for that lovely map. And I'm going to talk about being in Sevilla for about 4 years. And my experience there, working in 2 small private academies, which were under the same private business. In my first year, I was in an academy I was 1 out of 9 teachers in one town. And then second and third year there, I was the only teacher in a small academy in a different town. And those experiences were radically different, even though I was working for the same company. And I will also discuss policies, training, and discussion, or lack thereof. And as you can see, in Sevilla, I didn't have any of those things. However, in Segovia, for the last 2 years, I had a very different experience. It was still a small school, between 9 and 11 teachers, depending on the year. But this school was a part of a large global cultural organization. And this organization had a lot of policies in place, specifically regarding diversity, relating to race, and also to queerness, to sex and gender. And there was mandatory training, both teaching training, but also relating to diversity. And there was also really open discussion with my boss anyway, and the staff room was a pretty friendly, open, discussion-friendly environment. So yeah. All right, and then also after I detail those 2 experiences, I'm going to talk about what I learned from each of them. So starting in Sevilla, here we go. My first experience upon arriving in Sevilla was a general aura of unwelcome, unfortunately. So the day that I arrived, all of the teachers went immediately into some training for Trinity exam preparation, which I'd done before. So I was a little bit like, okay. But I sat through the training, which was basically an Irish woman reading the exam descriptors to us. So that was very helpful. And then afterwards, the trainer asked me if she could speak to me privately, which I thought was really strange. You know, she's not my new boss. She's sort of a friend of my boss who's visiting. What's going on? And then she said to me, well, your boss has asked me to ask you to please shave your beard. And I was like, oh, the first day upon arriving, it's not something you immediately expect for your new boss, who you've just met in person, to tell you, now you need to alter your appearance. And she said, well, you know, he's concerned that the children might laugh at you. I was like, okay. And I was just so gobsmacked that someone would have the kind of audacity to say to you immediately, okay, you have to change yourself now that you work for me. I was so sort of shocked and in a bit of a state that I went back to the apartment that I had moved into the day before and waxed the hair off my face and neck because I didn't know what else to do. I just arrived in a new country. I just signed a lease on an apartment. Financially, would I have been in a position to leave and go somewhere else? Don't know. But, you know, there was a certain amount of pressure there in which I felt I had to comply. And throughout my time there was a certain amount of pressure to appear feminine, act feminine, wear feminine clothes. I was told a couple of times I should wear skirts. I did when it was hot, but when it's not hot, I'm not wearing a skirt. Sorry, not sorry. So yeah. And I just felt really frustrated in that moment. And I felt a lot of like shame that I had given in to the pressure, you know, and done it. And so I was sort of buoyed by that experience. And anytime after that, one of the other teachers, because he never asked me directly himself, he always sent someone else. One of the other teachers came and asked me. I said, nope, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I think it's unprofessional and inappropriate. And if he wants me to do it, he can come and tell me himself. And he never did. But it sort of became a bit of a thing. Every couple of weeks, I would have one of the other teachers awkwardly asking me. And always one of the female teachers, never one of the male teachers. Don't know why. Maybe I was supposed to follow their model. Don't know. Yeah. Materials and resources in this academy. Yes, Tyson, you're right. You feel less powerful in these situations because this is a person who has power over you in a new place. I've just come to a new country where I'm not a native speaker and he is. You know, there were a lot of factors that made me immediately feel a lot of pressure that I had to do what he said. Yeah. Thank you, Irene. Yeah. Checking out. Oh, I can't believe you were asked to take out your earrings, Tyson. That's so silly. I forgot to put in earrings today. Nobody mentioned anything. Materials and resources. Well, we were using, it's been discussed in many of the other sessions. So I'll just say cisgendered, white, nuclear family, very typical ELT materials. Everybody's white, straight, middle class. We have mom, dad, and 2 kids who are from the UK. And then we have the other branch of our family who are mom, dad, and 2 kids, and they're from Australia. We're all white. And this is a peek into our lives. This sort of doctor is a man, nurse is a woman sort of scenario. We learned the word housewife, but not house husband or house spouse or stay at home mom, stay at home dad. Yeah, I don't know. And they were fairly recent materials as well, published in the previous year, 2014, or it had been updated in the previous year, 2014. So I was a bit really, and it actually came to a head where I was teaching a lesson on sports, and one of the 9-year-old, and I had a flashcard which had a picture of a sports team of football players who were all white boys. And one of the 9-year-old girls put her hand up, Helen, the picture for team is wrong. Why is it all boys? Girls can play football too, direct quote. So if the 9-year-old girl knows you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. So that flashcard got changed. And after that, I started making a lot of changes with the materials. My first year with the company, when I was working in the school with 9 other teachers, I felt quite restricted. I couldn't really do that. But after changing to the other academy in the small town, I kind of did what I wanted. You know, I substituted flashcards for more diverse families and mixed race families with 2 dads or 2 moms, or single parents or grandparents as guardians, you know, that sort of thing. So I was able to change and augment the materials quite a lot. Later on, I would frequently play on the interests of the students. So I remember doing a lesson on family, and the students in that class were really into Marvel at the time. And so I absolutely stole a photo of the actor who was playing Black Panther at that time, who has unfortunately just passed away, sad, and used him as the husband. And you know, I was able to change things a bit, but the materials presented as they were extremely heteronormative and kind of racist, really. There was like no representation of anyone other than white people in it, which was frustrating. At least I was able to make changes later on. Training and professional development was non-existent at this company. We had staff meetings where we discussed, you know, where we were in the curriculum, how we were following the term plan, when exams were coming. Oh, you're responsible for making the exam for this level. You're responsible for this, but no actual training or professional development run by the school. Interactions with staff and students varied. In the first school, where I was one of many teachers, I did feel quite like a bit of an outcast. Also, I arrived later than them, but I did actually connect with another teacher who arrived later, and she and I had a really good relationship, and she's kind of the reason I stayed that year, and she encouraged me to stay and to go to the second location in my second and third year, because she said, listen, when you're there, you can do what you want. You don't need to just do what you're told. You can really create good connections with students and parents without all the other, when you gesture too much and knock your own headphone out, not too much interference from the administrators or other teachers or the school owner. Yeah, these experiences are only in the last 5 years. So, and finally, professional and personal environment. As I say, when I was at the small school, I had sort of tempestuous relationships with other teachers. I think they found my queerness kind of, I don't think it outwardly bothered them. I'm not trying to say that the other teachers were prejudiced. I just think that I came into a situation where several of them were already friends and had bonds and connections, and my difference didn't really make it easy for me to integrate with them, and it was hard. And also, I think there was a bit of a toxic environment in the school where people were encouraged to, you know, gossip about each other and talk about each other behind their back, that sort of thing. Conversely, when I went to the smaller location where I was the only teacher, of course that didn't happen because I didn't have to interact with anyone, though I did form some quite close virtual connections with some of the teachers in other academies under the same company. And of course, as I say, the students were really welcoming and excited, and I stayed there for almost 3 years. So a student later told me I was the only teacher who stayed more than a year, and I was the teacher who had stayed the longest at that school. And so I really formed long-term bonds. I still speak to students and parents from that town now. So yeah, the difference really much was in the environment. Yeah, so I think I sort of summed up Sevilla as best I could then. So what I have learned. Oh, I have some questions in the chat. Let me check them. Oh, that's lovely, Irene. Queer colors. Oh, that's sweet. I love it. Kids are amazing. We really have to give them credit for how smart they are. Yes, Taylor, I totally agree. Things have changed, but they also haven't changed. You know, yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so frustrating. I can't imagine a male teacher being told, actually, I can imagine a male teacher being told not to wear leggings. That's so silly. It's like, you know, girls are allowed to play football, join the male football team in high school, but the boys aren't allowed to join the field hockey team because the girls wear skirts. Okay, just change the uniform then so the boys can play field hockey. You know, I don't understand why we have such preoccupation with other people's gender presentation. Let people wear what they want. Let them wear the clothes and hair that they want. 21st century, right? Okay, so things that I learned. Pick your battles, okay? Sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. For example, there was an instance where, for example, the facial hair battle, I won, obviously, as I continued to do what I wanted. I lost that first battle, but I won the war. You know, for example, if I had spoken up when I was at the school with many teachers about the materials, I probably wouldn't have been allowed to move to the smaller school and been able to create diverse, interesting curriculum and form the bonds with students that I did when I was there. So sometimes you have to pick your battles. Sometimes you have to let go of something to win the war. Sometimes you have to go, okay, I'm not going to speak up about this, thing that you just said that's really problematic, because I know that you'll go away and I'll close my classroom door and I can continue doing the things that I'm doing, which I know benefit my students. Sometimes you just have to do that. For instance, another instance where this happened was actually in the smaller school, where the owner would visit once a month to pay me and inform me of things. He insisted to the receptionist that we needed to have boy and girl signs on the 2 bathroom doors, which I found really problematic because, well, as a non-binary person, which one's for me? But also, what if, parents come to pick up their child and they have grandma or grandpa, they have an elderly relative who needs help going to the toilet, and the person helping them is the other gender. How do they choose which bathroom to use? Or, a daughter and her father, and she needs the toilet, he needs to help her, which one do they use? It just seems silly. If you put queer issues aside, it's just, even for family, it just seems to be putting up unnecessary barriers. So she kept putting up the signs, I kept just taking them down. And then finally this was resolved when she wanted to advertise her babysitting services at the school. And she said, our boss doesn't need to know. And I said, fine, he doesn't need to know about the bathroom signs either. And she and I came to an accord in that way. Yeah, sometimes you just have to take your wins where you find them. And unfortunately, you can't always win. Go away to the small school and do it your way. I feel like I've already talked about this quite a lot. When I was in the big group with the other teachers, I felt really stifled. But when I was at the smaller school, I was able to really dig into forming real connections with students, because I was able to be my genuine, authentic self with them. This may be really obvious, but it just occurred to me one day, I deserve better treatment. I deserve professional opportunities. I deserve to not work at the same job for 3 years with no acknowledgement other than 50 euros more for each year that I've worked there. I deserve professional advancement. I deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. I don't want to get too far into labor relations, but yeah. And also something important that I learned is the importance of communities, because obviously the community in the first location was really toxic and unhealthy. But then in the second location, where I was the only teacher, I was able to create really great bonds with students and parents, have conversations. As I say, I'm still in contact with a lot of these people, which is really great. So yeah, community, we can't underestimate the impact of community. Yeah. Okay, Ladia, I will address your question at the end, okay? I have seen it though. So moving on to Segovia, which is a radically different experience. My body hair and gender presentation were never remarked on. I existed and thus I was. It was great. Yeah, in fact, my boss, when she hired me, said, the center manager said, I really liked that you used the mixed title actually, because it felt like I was judging you based on your qualifications and experience, not based on what gender you are. And I went, oh, great. I mean, it also means that I'm non-binary. And she was like, great. And then we just carried on. Like, that conversation was insignificant because it was, right? My gender has no impact on my teaching ability or my experience or my qualifications. Yeah, so that was great. There were several instances where I sort of came out to colleagues and sort of told them, I'm a non-binary, that's what this means. And a lot of them were like, okay, and that was it. Occasionally I got sort of questions like, what does that mean? But most of them were fine. A lot of them were in their 40s, 50s, 60s and had teenage kids who had friends who were non-binary or trans or lesbian or gay, or they had some like at least a little understanding and exposure, and their kids were all like fine. I distinctly remember speaking to one of my colleagues' sons and him saying, oh, my friend is non-binary. As Elizabeth mentioned in her earlier talk, Gen Z, they know their stuff. If they're not sure how they feel or who they are, then they go looking for information on the internet and they find out how to define themselves. Yeah. Materials and resources, significantly better because it was a broad global organization, cultural, with a lot of cultural influence. There's still a lot of ways to go. If you just watched Amanda's talk, then I'll just gesture towards everything that she said. What she was addressing race, but yes, it was significantly better than what I had experienced at the previous school, because the organization made their own materials, and because they had a lot of policies about diversity and equity that was fairly represented in the materials. Training and professional development was mandatory at the new place where I was working. It was great. Well, you had to do a certain amount of training and a certain amount of professional development, and you were actually given paid hours to do that, which was incredible and totally different from, here's a classroom, do your thing. It was wonderful, and diversity training was included, which was excellent. Yeah. Also policy, sorry, I'll go back. Policy, upon arriving, when I read the handbook, and it said, we practice tolerance. We do not allow for any kind of discrimination based on gender, male, female gender, or genderqueer people. And I just sort of had to sit down and be really excited about the fact that the word genderqueer had been used in policy to say, as an organization, we stand against discrimination against genderqueer people, which was just really wonderful to read and see. It made me really happy. In fairness, those policies had been written the year before I arrived in 2017, 18. So a couple years later than the books I was using at the old school, but still. Interactions with staff and students, positive. I didn't have any negative interactions with anyone. Nobody asked me pointed questions. Nobody asked me to change myself. Occasionally I get the honest, so what do I call you, or how should I refer to you question, but I never felt the sort of toxic environment that I felt at the other school. Same, professional and personal environment, positive, friendly, accessible. While all the teachers were busy, a lot of them made a point to welcome me and be friendly, eat lunch with me, that sort of thing. So it was a huge difference from the previous school, where it seemed that infighting was encouraged, whereas in this environment, collaboration and discussion and mentoring was encouraged. So what I learned in Segovia was policies, training, and professional development are so important. All schools should be offering them, and they should be, teachers should be paid for them, because we're developing ourselves and becoming better workers. So include it. And having the policy there, knowing that I'm protected. If someone attacks me because of my gender, the company is there to back me up, and they have policies which say how they will react in that sort of situation. It just gives you such a huge boost, knowing that, and knowing that there is diversity training, that professional development is encouraged, that you as an individual are encouraged to develop and change and improve. That sort of atmosphere makes a huge difference in your mental health. For example, professional learning communities, networking with like-minded professionals, especially during COVID, that really became huge. Instead of just in-person meetings, we were having Zoom meetings left, right, and center. And I connected with teachers from centers all over Spain, which was amazing. Diversity and representation in materials matters. I noticed a distinct difference between the two. I noticed it. I'm sure that the students, if I had taken the resources from Segovia and started teaching them in Sevilla, the students would have noticed the difference immediately. Transparency in professional and personal working environments is according to your comfort and safety. At no point did I feel like I had to disclose things, or I had to defend my existence or my gender presentation or anything. It was just, here you are, let's do the work. And that's it. But also, I never felt pressured. Sometimes you might be in a situation where you feel pressured and you have to act or do things according to your own comfort or your own safety. I'm talking about living in Spain. There are countries where, it's illegal or dangerous to be queer. So, So next steps, suggestions for teachers. First thing, Tyson, I'm going to come back to your comment about equalizing power at the end. Okay, talking to sometimes queer, but sometimes not, teachers who make an effort to integrate diversity into their curriculum, into the materials they're working with. who are making effort to use pronouns and present diverse pictures of diverse people. If you're sort of stuck on how to, collate resources or find inspiration, talk to them. Other teachers, other teachers are there to help you. That's what professional learning communities are. Yeah. Stand up for diversity, yes, when it is safe for you to do so. Okay, this is the thing. I would never suggest that anyone put themselves at risk. There are situations where it is not safe or not healthy or not comfortable to stand up for LGBTQ issues, whether you are queer or not. And I always say that you need to take care of yourself as well, okay? Whether you're a part of that community or not. Please be safe. Yes, take a stand, but do it in a way with which you are comfortable and safe, okay? Don't put yourself in an unsafe or uncomfortable situation. Look for resources from reputable organizations. It's more than just a Google. You can have a look at history of organizations, where they're based, what their policies are, that sort of thing. There is a plethora of educational resources and non-educational resources out there which are queer or embracing queerness. And it does take some time to look for them, but you can find them, but just make sure that you have a good look at them, okay? One of the other teachers, I think, talked about, preparing to teach a lesson and having a quick read and finding something problematic in the lesson and go, ooh, I'm glad I read that. Yeah, take the moment to read, okay? So if you're unsure about a topic, do your research or ask someone. There's no shame in having a quick Google or checking on Wikipedia, that's okay. I mean, I didn't know I was, demisexual and demi-romantic and androgynous. I didn't know I was non-binary when I was 5 years old. I just thought everybody felt a bit uncomfortable in their sort of female body. I thought that was just normal. It wasn't until I, went to university and traveled and studied and learned and did a whole lot of things and encountered these words on the internet that I sort of realized, oh, wow, there's a word for what I am. So always do your research, because queer people themselves are always doing their research. First I thought that I was bisexual. Then I thought, well, no, I'm not only, and then I thought I was pansexual. And then once I realized that I need that emotional connection, I realized, okay, demisexual is the word that describes me. There we go. And it took several years to get there. So really don't feel bad that you have to do your research, because queer people are still figuring it out too. So don't worry, okay? Yeah. Please be safe and take care of yourself. I sort of said that earlier. Reiteration, okay? Even if you might think, well, I'm an ally, I'm okay. Yes, great. I still value you, even though you're not a queer person, right? Please take care of yourselves. You are important, and don't put yourself at risk when you are advocating for queer people. Thank you for doing it, though. Do your best and take feedback on board. This is hard. I have many times had students go, Helen, and they've had a good criticism of materials or of something I've said or I've been teaching, and you just have to take a step back and go, okay, right, got that. Yeah. And that's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. We're all on an ongoing learning journey, right? Take your wins where you find them. Like I said before, pick your battles. You can't win them all. So, celebrate the wins and think about how you can improve the things you can improve later. Great. And finally, anticipate questions and try to answer them. A lot of teachers say they're really uncomfortable in talking about queer issues. And cool, if you don't often talk about queer issues, that's fine. I understand that. But as we anticipate questions when dealing with a grammar point or when dealing with text or vocabulary, anticipate questions students might ask about the queer topic you're going to discuss, okay? Anticipate questions, think about how you would answer them. Because the worst thing is being put on the spot and going, I've done it. Don't worry. Yeah, anticipate questions. And finally, last but not least, I'm with you. We're all in this together. So just reach out and don't worry, okay? Great. Our focus is on our learners, right? I'm not going to talk a lot about this because Elizabeth did an amazing 45-minute talk all about this, how 50% of our learners nowadays in Gen Z identify as queer. So, our learners deserve for us to do our best to teach them and to represent them in the best way that we can, especially if they're queer. Okay. So to finish, a resource that I'd love to suggest just for a laugh when you're taking a break from planning, A really wonderful queer educator and artist and writer is Sophie Labelle, who is from Montreal, and writes a lot about queer issues, trans issues. Writes, for example, here's a comic about implicit curriculum. Students notice what is and isn't in the curriculum, okay? What's left out of the curriculum teaches us as much as what's in it. So not having representation teaches students that queer people aren't important because they're not there, right? Yeah. So we are all in this together. We need to talk to each other, okay? So Q&A, hit me. Feel free to unmute your microphone and ask a question. I'm also going to check in the chat. There were some questions earlier I'd like to address.
Helen, there was one from Lottie, I think, before. Did she, the question was, how did parents react to the material you've created?
Yeah, I had zero parent reaction, actually. No parents came to me to complain. One parent came to me to say that she thought it was really great. I was talking about women in business because she was a single mom and a business owner. And she said to me, Helen, I really like that you do that. And I said, okay, thank you. The problem was the language barrier. A lot of the parents, especially in Second Town, didn't speak English. And while my Spanish was approaching functional at that time, by the time I got to Segovia, my Spanish was quite, I'd say A2 to B1-ish level. So I was doing okay then. But especially in Sevilla, there were some communication barriers. I think, yeah, maybe parents would have talked to me more, unfortunately. Yeah. All right, 3 new messages. What are the other questions?
Yeah. Taylor, I'd love to hear some suggestions about organizations you recommend that provide good materials.
Yeah, in my references page. Also, Taylor, can we talk about this after the chat as well? Because I want to connect with you about something else anyway. But yes, for example, the, sorry, I went too far. I'm going to stop screen sharing and I'm going to share one resource that I really like, a good source. It is the Trans Students Network, educational resources. I'm going to screen share the page. Screen share my Safari, please. So here's a good example of an educational organization. They've done this really great infographic series. So there's, of course, the gender unicorn, but then there's also some things on pronouns, on visibility, some things about law in America, supporting trans youth, queer youth of color. Yeah, so there's lots of things here. And this is the Trans Student Educational Resource Center, okay, which is based in America. So this is one that I really like. Yeah, I'll stop sharing that now. Other questions?
We have time for a couple more questions.
It's okay if people don't have questions. Also, I'd like to point out that if there are questions you want to ask, but you don't feel comfortable asking in this environment because there's some pressure, that's okay. You can actually reach me online. I'm pretty active on social media. You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram under the handle Helen Teaches ENG. I also have a website, which is more towards teaching, and a Facebook page that I don't use a lot, but exists. So yeah, if you have a question that you want to ask that you can't ask now, or you think of something later, then you can contact me. Anything new in the chat?
I'm going to actually interrupt, sorry.
Okay.
It's 5:02, and so we have gone about 10 minutes over. So sorry. I'm going to thank you very much, Helen, for your presentation. And I'm super stoked that we were your first presentation. So congratulations, you did a fantastic job.
Thank you. Sorry about the tech issues in the middle.
No worries. For anyone who's put comments or questions in the chat box, they'll still remain there. So Helen can probably get a hold of them. And we'll start our next session with Abigail in about 6 minutes.
Okay. 6 minutes.
Yeah. I'm happy to hang around and answer those questions if that's okay.
Okay.
Is that okay, Tyson?
It's fine. I think it would be better to do it in the chat box, just so people don't feel the obligation to sit and listen.
Absolutely, that's fine. I can do that. I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you, Helen. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome.